Welcome to Where's the Any Key, the podcast where we talk shop about topics, tips, and trends for the modern IT admin. I'm your host, Ryan Bacon, the IT support manager at JumpCloud. Joining me today is Tom Bridge. He is a partner at Technolutionary in Washington, D.C., and a producer on the MacAdmins podcast. Welcome, Tom.
Hey, thanks, Ryan. I'm really glad to be here today.
I'm glad to have you. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. I'm a partner at Technolutionary. We started out 15 years ago as refugees from an IT department that was about to face some downsizing. We decided to downsize ourselves and started out a consulting firm. At the time, we were doing some, moonlighting for other IT companies, but then we started building a business out of the whole thing. And now we've got about 65 clients. I have about 700 workstations in management right now, as of 3:00 on Monday. Mission of the organization is to provide IT operations support for small to medium businesses. And we do a lot of Mac-focused IT, mostly because most of our clients are Mac-focused organizations. It's the platform that I choose to support most often. We feel like we've got a pretty good array of clients. Some of them are like law firms and some of them are design firms. And we do a couple of concert venues here in DC, when there's not a pandemic on. Our general focus is delivering that outsourced IT experience with a lot of personality and a lot of focus on, user empowerment, I think is probably the best way to phrase it.
Yeah, I feel that's really a good way to a good relationship to have with your end users is, have that trust there, have them feel empowered. And I think that makes things easier on both sides.
Yeah.
Of the service equation. For
sure. And, one of our perspectives is that, we like to be the IT firm that says yes, because we know a lot of IT shops don't. They've either decided, for security reasons and, security reasons with a little trademark symbol at the end, because they're not going to actually explain what they mean, which is I am too lazy to support this, at least properly, or at least too lazy to set it up right the first time. And so, they want to avoid a lot of, red tape or at least user communication issues that they don't know they have yet. Most of our focus is around saying yes. Because that's really what our users want. They want us to enable them to do the thing that they want to do. We come at it from an improv perspective, which is you never just say yes or no. You say yes and or no, but to really kind of build on what it is that they're actually asking for. And sometimes it's just a matter of understanding what they actually want and getting them to see it from a perspective of maybe what you asked for isn't what you actually want. We have a lot of conversations that are, well, tell me more about what you're trying to do. Tell me what you're trying to accomplish. And then, usually it gets to a place where they say, oh, what I really want is to do, this other thing over here. And you're like, oh, well, we can do that. And that won't require like opening up your entire Google Drive for the entire company, which is something that we got asked to do recently. And they store confidential information in there. So we're like, no, we're not going to do that. But we're going to help you figure out a way to do that that's actually going to make your mission work.
Exactly. And I think that leads into really what we're wanting to talk about on this episode, and that is trust between the IT provider and the customer.
Absolutely.
And when you establish that trust, it really enables you to make those suggestions and to really help your customer get to where they need to go.
Right. And, from our perspective, if our clients don't trust us, we're failing them. And if our clients don't trust us, then why did they hire us in the first place, right? Some places do it because it's like, hey, we've got to have an IT department. These guys seem like, they're not dumb as a bag of hammers. So, that's never really how it goes, right? You've got to have somebody that's trusted, and establishing that trust and building that trust, not just with the decision makers, but with everybody you encounter, has been really, really important. We had an onboarding almost coming up on 2.5 years ago now, with a fairly large client. And, we had been interfacing with executives and we didn't know anybody there. And so essentially, we'd been mostly talking with people who were, up in the upper echelons of management. And we went to meet everybody and we're like, hi, we're Technolutionary and we're here to help. And, nobody really kind of knew how to handle that. And so essentially we had to have a lot of conversations about what it means to be someone's outsourced IT department. And, one of the things they came back to us with, and they were like, well, do you have a code of ethics? And I was like, well, yeah, it's mostly don't do stupid things. And they said, yes, but have you written that down? And we said, well, no, but give us the weekend and we'll start thinking about it. And so I spent a lot of time on Google. I spent a lot of time looking up what other organizations do. And I found out that the SANS Institute has a really good open source code of ethics that, has been around for IT practitioners since 2004. They publish it on their website, and it basically breaks out to, 3 main sections. I will strive to know myself and be honest about my capability. I will conduct my business in a manner that assures the IT profession is considered one of integrity and professionalism. And I respect privacy and confidentiality. Those 3 big areas are like everything that I believe in terms of IT structures. And so we started looking at this and we're like, this is awesome. This is exactly what it takes. And so, we provide that now. We handle all of their IT onboarding now for new employees. And we provide a link to our code of ethics in all of our initial meetings with new staff members. And it comes along with like, hey, we're going to be reaching out about security issues. We're going to be reaching out about IT issues. You can come to us at any time. And we want them to be clearly aware that we're going to hold that information, respectfully, and we are going to do so in confidence, and we're going to treat each other like adults and have clear lines of communications. And so for them to see us as an outside vendor who are, essentially not, signing on to the company employee manual, right, which has a lot of those same rules like baked into it that says, I'm not going to be a jerk to my fellow employees. I'm not going to belittle them or anything like that. I'm not going to embarrass them. We have this, secondary document that essentially helps us establish that trust with, our clients. And it's a big part of how you operate any business that is so integral like this to the trust nature of their business that you have some rules for the road. And so once we established those rules for the road, and once we made sure everybody had a copy of those rules of the road that we were going to follow, it was like we were part of their family all of a sudden. And people were opening up to us in new and different ways. And we got to find out about a lot of issues that were happening inside of the IT environment that used to be handled by like the VP of engineering. And so we, essentially he got freed up to do his day job, which is actually running the engineering department that powers their company. And we got freed up to do a lot of the stuff that really enhanced their value long term. All because we were really clear about where we were starting from in terms of what our ethics were, what our clear lines of communication were going to be, and we set up very clear expectations for how our staff were going to behave with their staff. And once we'd kind of like lined up those key features, it was just like the lights turned on and everybody understood how this was going to work. And it kind of, paved the way for a much better relationship at that point.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, and I will fully admit that I've always been hesitant to go, to do IT in an external facing role. My entire career has been internal IT, mainly because I viewed that I really value the relationships that I've always built with my coworkers, and looking at, working for an MSP, working with external customers, it's like how I never really saw a way, to build that same kind of relationships. And from the sounds of it, I'm completely wrong.
Well, no, I feel like there are a lot of MSPs that kind of come in and don't necessarily take the same steps that we take. and who, they build trust in their own way. But sometimes those have negative experiences. And I know that, we had to have a conversation with one of our clients when we took over the IT operations from another consultancy about kind of what had been going on. And we built up the trust and relationship. And we found out that they had been being, badly overbilled by the previous company. And, we had to break it to them. We were like, look, I'm really sorry to report this, but, I think that they were taking advantage of the trust that you established. That's not always a good way. That's not a good feeling to have to tell anybody. By the way, that you have been taken advantage of is not a great conversation to have with people. I feel like there are a lot of get rich quick MSPs out there. And there's a kind of a whole school of thought around some of those, at least on the Mac side of things, that is very much, maximize your monthly billings and all of those things instead of, helping an organization accomplish their mission.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. I before I got into IT, I spent I did a little stint in sales, which, more power to the salespeople. That is something that is not for me. Yep. But I did learn one thing, and that was that if if your goal is to help your customer, your client, meet their needs and not try to place your needs above or your desires above theirs, that the end result and the relationship and the trust that comes along with that is so much stronger than just like steamrolling in and being like, hey, we're going to do this, this, and this for you, and without regard to what they want. And yep. And just, throw the everything plus the kitchen sink into them, even whether they needed it or not. And I think that especially nowadays, this could be some wishful thinking on my part, but I think that nowadays people tend to be a little bit more savvy to that, just because the sheer amount of information that's on hand, it's, you could just Google, like, do I need, 5 48-port PoE switches to run five to run 5 wireless access points, that sort of stuff. And so it's not only is it the right thing to do, it's in the long term the smarter thing to do, to be upfront, honest, and fair.
Yeah. Well, and some of it is also that a lot of MSPs are under a lot of pressure from their partner organizations. And I know that we partner with Ruckus, who are now part of CommScope. We partner with, various and sundry other hardware providers. And I'm not going to say that there's not a huge amount of pressure to deliver high sales as part of that process. And, we come into it honestly, and we tell everybody we partner with that when we want distribution access, it's for simplicity. It's not so that we can maximize sales. It's not so that we can maximize revenue, and they're not going to see us be a pump and dump partner. You're going to see recurring licensing relationships with us, and we're going to work through that process, and where it fits, we're going to make the sale. But we're not going to over provision sales, and we're not going to over provision these environments. And there have been a couple of times when we, had a chat with a company, and they said, well, that's really not how we like to do things. And we said, well, great. Thanks for telling me. Thanks for being honest. I really appreciate that. And we'll find someone else. And because, that's really I'm not going to do that to just be counter, I'm not going to take on that kind of relationship if your values don't match my values. And we've had to tell clients that have come to us as well, to, prospective clients rather, who say, really what I want to do is I want to put a keylogger on everybody's machine, and I want to make sure that everyone's being productive all the time, and I want you to block all social media. And we come at it with the perspective of, if that's how you feel about your employees, I'm not sure this is a good fit for us, because I feel like that's highly invasive. into people's private lives and highly invasive into, their organization. And if that's their whole idea, that if, they think that these are people that are, coming in, they're cookie cutter, we can, stamp them out like license plates, and, nobody should ever have any fun at work, and no one should definitely ever watch the news at work, and no one should ever be, anything but other than 100% engaged in their work tasks. That just feels counter to reality to me. Sorry.
It really does, and also if the end user, if those employees, they'll realize that those IT people are acting like Big Brother, and they are essentially the enemy.
Yep.
Or at least they're not our allies on that, then there is no trust there. And they're going to be hesitant to reach out to you to have problems.
Well, and that's the whole deal. They're not going to work with us. Those are not people who are going to be, deeply honest and say, hey, I clicked on a funny link in an email. You're going to find that one out the hard way after they've gutted your network, right? Like, cooperation between the average employee and the IT folks is absolutely critical, especially in 2020. We did a phishing exercise last week with one of our clients and sent out 150 emails that were essentially saying, hey, we saw a suspicious login on your account. Please log in to report this information, right? So, it's clearly a phish. We had more than 50 people report it within the first 10 minutes. Most of them were reporting it, through the established mediums, but we had people like DMing us on Slack, sending it to our personal emails to be like, hey, this looks really weird. And I think the security thing, the only reason that they would do that is if they trust us.
Exactly. And along those lines, this is going to be me bragging about my end users a little bit, but like we changed password managers recently. And, I put out, we were under a time crunch to get everything migrated over. I put out an email, a company-wide email with instructions on what to do and everything like that, which can very much look like a phishing email. and I had, just seeing the people like chime into our security channel on Slack, DMing us, like emailing directly, saying, hey, is this legitimate? Just made me so proud.
Absolutely.
That security training, and also the fact that they felt comfortable questioning, an email from me. I've never been more proud of my end users than at that point.
When I was first getting started in IT, I was working help desk, and how many people have ever seen that Nick Burns skit on Saturday Night Live where Jimmy Fallon is like, move, and he like does a bunch of things and he makes fun of the user, and show me someone who doesn't have that IT experience in their back pocket and can pull it out and be like, this was where the IT guy was a jerk to me. Because it's always dudes. I'm sorry. It's always dudes who are like that. But, the experience of that broken trust isn't something that most people have engendered in IT. But it's something that they see often enough that it's a problem. We used to call First Class. We used to support First Class as a large email system for a company of 200. And First Class as an email system actually was pretty cool. There were a lot of cool things. There were like Google Groups before there were Google Groups, right? With their conferences, feature. And it was a lot of good stuff in there. I liked it a lot. But there was the rule in the department of if you have to call support for First Class, and we did probably about once a quarter, something being weird or a backup not working right, or if you got this one guy and his name was Don, if you got Don, you hung up and call back. Because it was, it just got to the point where, the IT department head was like, look, don't talk to this guy. He's a magnificent jerk. And, it was just known by all the help desk folks, if you get this one guy, hang up and call back, you're going to get somebody else. And, I think about that now, and I'm like, I would shudder to think that was any of us in IT now. Because it's if that's the relationship you have with your outsourced vendor, something is badly wrong.
Yeah, I completely agree. And my biggest my biggest goal for any IT department that I'm part of is that that we fight against those IT stereotypes. We prove that we're there to help and go for that customer centric approach. And it makes me so happy to see that's becoming the norm, because I've known people who have been in IT 3 times as long as I have, who held that stereotypical mindset of the end user is stupid and they don't know what they're talking about, and it's my job to clean up after them, and I resent them for it.
Yep.
And like, first off, how can you like work in that kind of environment? How can you live in that kind of environment? I would be miserable just being angry and resentful all the time.
Well, and I mean, I know some of where that comes from, right? And some of it does come from, people in our, on our teams that we see who say things like, well, I've just never been good in technology, or I'm technically illiterate. That's my favorite of the bunch, because, those are also people, who, if you ask them the question, well, do you think it's okay to admit that you're illiterate about something? If that was, part of your job. And so, that incredulousness that comes along with this, it gets to be endemic as time goes by. But yeah, the way that you fix those problems is by, realizing that what they've learned is that if they try to understand it, they're going to get made fun of. Or if they try things, it's going to break, and then they're going to get made fun of for trying things. And so, you've got to build your trust in other ways with those folks. And essentially, those are folks that you're going to have to spend more time with.
It's one of those things. Yeah, it's one of those things where they say 80% of your problems are going to come from 20% of your customers. And I worked in an environment where I came in as a one-person IT shop, and the person who was there before me was that real condescending, where you ask them to do something, they're like, fine, and you move and do it. And it took me a while to establish trust, and having to deal with the repercussions of that. I mean, I don't know how many times they came up and be like, hey, they finally come to me and be like, hey, this printer hasn't been working properly for 4 months. And it's like, what? You're telling me now? Okay, I fix it. It's fixed within 10 minutes. And, the more I kept doing that, and the more that I, let them know that they matter and that they have priority, help to build that trust. So by the time that I left there, people weren't afraid of reaching out and saying, hey, we have a problem with that. I never made fun of them. I would, if I were to go and make light of the situation, it was generally self-deprecating. It was, or, joining them in ridiculing the stupid printer that it can't do what it's supposed to do.
It's always the printers, right?
It's always the printers. and it was good to see that things were working as they should. The relationship between IT and the frontline, the rest of the company, was right. And another part of that made it very important is that I made myself visible. I didn't just sit in my office or sit in my cubicle the entire time and just be like, come to me if you need something. I would essentially make rounds.
Yeah.
First off, it's good to stretch your legs. but while I was doing that, I would check in and be like, hey, is everything going okay? And part of that was necessary, because at first people weren't telling me when there were problems, but also it showed that I cared. And if they think that you care, then that just cements that trust, and their willingness to work with you. And
yeah. And the having that conversation, we used to schedule just office days with a bunch of our clients where we wouldn't charge them extra, but we'd just come work from their office that day. I'd come and take up space in a spare desk or something like that, and make it a point to walk around and talk to folks and just make sure that everything was going as expected. It's a lot harder now to do those same kind of things. And so we've been doing a lot of emails just to be like, hey, just checking in. Wanted to let you know about, some other thing. Hey, we're doing some new updates this week, so look for those in your queue. And by the way, trying to get that extra thing. I just want to make sure that folks are okay. And because there are so many places where we find out like 3 or 4 weeks later that there was a problem with the backup, that they were getting a funny message, and now suddenly they need something off of that backup that doesn't work anymore, right? And then it's like nightmare scenario, right? Because it's a broken trust that leads to more broken trust, and those are the kind of things that are heartbreaking for me, at least in terms of where we have to overcome those situations, because it's just like, damn, if I'd reached out to that person just to make sure that they were okay, we would have had a real slam dunk of an experience. And that's one of the things that we talk about a lot internally is just ask folks, hey, is there anything I can do for you? From an IT perspective, and just treating it from that perspective of, is there anything I can do to help out? Especially when you're an exterior team member, right? There's nothing that shows your value to your colleagues than offering to help them. And, they remember that because, even if there's nothing you can do in that moment, they remember, hey, Tom said, if there was anything I could do to help, I wonder if this qualifies. And then, just getting that out there and having that conversation. One of the other things that some of our folks find confusing is that now when we do remote screen sharing sessions with them, we use a tool that provides like a 9 or a 10 digit ID and then a password for every session, right? And so we use that as an explicit consent with our folks, to basically be like, every time we start a phone call, with, hey, can we do a screen sharing session? And we jump into that screen share, we get affirmative consent for jumping in and seeing their screen. And we specifically say, is it okay if I see your screen and control your computer? Because that takes away, one of the things that, folks are untrustworthy about, random people like in their computer, doing those kind of things. But that explicit consent statement that happens as part of all of that is so important to folks getting to trust you, that you're not able to just jump into their machine, because that's weird. It's like sitting down at their desk when they're not there or when they are there, and you got to make sure that you've got their permission to do that. And if you have a relationship that's respectful and trusting like that, the number of things that you can get out of the way early is just great. Because one of the things that we make sure that our clients know very early on is like, hey, if you ever have a question about whether an email is phishing or whether a message is weird or anything like that, we basically come out and flat say, I would much rather, tell you, no, that's phishing, or no, that's not phishing, or no, that's, or yes, that's a weird dialogue. I would rather do that 100 times a day than miss something. Because the cleanup from missing something is, tens of hours, thousands of dollars, and it's just rough for everybody when it's a 5-minute question or that we're going to comp you time for. Everybody's afraid with outsourced IT departments that, you've got to, manage them very closely or their budget's going to go way out of whack. Well, no. Yes, occasionally there are going to be some situations where you burst upwards. But it's usually because you've got some sort of pent up need that's not been addressed elsewhere. Right.
And on the internal side, it's still, even if, you're not billing, there's still, I get a lot, what I hear most from our team is like, we know you're busy. I don't want to waste your time.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. But, along the same lines, we make it known, like, I'm more than happy to take those few minutes to look at something and, let you know, than go and have to try to recover from a ransomware attack. That is never fun.
Yeah.
So
That's no one's idea of a good time.
yeah, so I think that it's different but similar. Whether you're internal or external, that some upfront investment in time and communication with your customers is pays dividends. And again, it shows that you're approachable. It shows that you're available and that you're trustworthy, and that makes it more likely that they will come. That they'll come to you when it's vital that they do. And we put in at Jump Cloud, we have a zero fault policy. We're all human. We all make mistakes. Just that, as long as you're not trying to cover up a mistake, we will mitigate it. You don't have to worry. You'll be fine. Just let us know. And I think having policy, not just having policies like that, but communicating those policies is vital. And that goes back to kind of like runs counter to what you were the type of customer that you're talking about before, who wants wants you to have your fingers in everything and of their employees and make sure that they're not doing anything that's not productive. And I just completely lost my train of thought there. But, okay. I'll just skip over that. I don't think that was really going anywhere. But so having that trust, having that communication out there is important to an efficiently running IT service, whether it's internal or external. And those relationships that you build with with your customers. I keep wanting to say end users because that's how I've always said it. But after thinking about this more, ever since you brought up this topic, is that that's that phrase, that end user, is kind of a holdover from those dark days of IT, because you're not really looking at them as a person.
I like colleagues. Colleagues is my jam because it's incredibly familial. And it's it keeps things really clear that we're all pros here. We are all people that are trying to get stuff done. We are trying to get to the end of the day with our tasks accomplished on behalf of the mission of the organization. And that's the other thing that we also have to tell people, is that your mission is our mission. We are part of your team. And if we're not part of your team, something, it's not for lack of trying. But, building that kind of trust internally is all about how you see people. And if you keep saying, well, my users, blah, well, my colleagues, my friends, my coworkers, those are, we would often say my friends in X department would be another way to handle it. But, using humanized language, using empathy as a tool in your favor, is the secret weapon of any service IT department, or any service department, not just service IT, but like service to the organization. Empathy is your number one goal. You need to understand what your people's challenges are. You need to understand the conditions that they're operating under, and you use that to build your response. And that's hard fought in a lot of cases. I have had a lot of interactions with IT departments that are much more concerned about their own reviews than they are about the needs of their users, right? Like they're trying to avoid a negative review by being very, very cautious. And I can understand that. But, they're also delaying a project that should take 2 weeks to accomplish and pushing it out over a 90-day time frame because they're afraid, right? Like that's... And IT via fear is, I don't know, there's always some healthy amount of fear that should be in IT. But, because I was, a lawyer friend said, being an in-house counsel is like having thousands of little panic attacks on behalf of your coworker every day. And I feel like IT is very much the same way. You know, like good policy comes from thinking about what could go wrong. And, you know, that's important. Having those little panic attacks in the hallway, you know, as you're thinking about what could fail with a firmware upgrade, I get it. Totally. I get it. But that should not paralyze you into non-response or non-action. And that's a challenge.
Yeah, it is. I mean, because, at the end of the day, bottom line is whether you're internal or external, the job of IT is to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of business operations. And being able, if you're, like you're saying, if you're driven by that fear, if you're driven by mistrust, if you're, anything like that, that's hampering that base goal. And anything that you can do to streamline things, to improve communication, to give you better insight into what the organization needs, the more effective you're going to be at that goal. And I think that in a very effective way of doing that is open, trusting communication with your colleagues, and with management, top to bottom, everybody within the organization, because everybody brings important insights to, everybody holds a piece to the larger puzzle. And, talking to everybody, will give you that bigger picture and help you, achieve those goals so much more effectively.
Well, I think that, one of the systems that IT is responsible for inside any organization is for the proof of identity, right? Like we talk about, directories and things like that, and putting together applications so that they're single sign-on, so that we're trust. We are the trust enablers for an organization. If our people don't trust us, then there's more than us they don't trust. Like their own systems, like their own, endpoints, like their, phones and stuff like that. So, understanding that there are ripple effects to failing that trust check that will cascade through systems that you are lovingly maintaining, even, unintentionally creating that kind of appearance of mistrust. Gets to have real consequences for an organization. So if you think that you're spending a lot of time on, structural identity, then you've got to spend your time on the identity of your own department and the trust of your own department in the hands of your people. And if you're not spending your time thinking about those kind of things, it's going to be a real challenge to get over that hurdle of building better internal trust, let alone external trust.
Yeah, and that actually brings up another good point. Another thing tied to that trust, and that's something that I can't think of a single IT person that doesn't like, and that's shadow IT. I mean, if they don't trust you, they're going to go off. Your customers, your colleagues are going to go off, and they're going to find their own solutions.
That's right.
For better or for worse.
That's right. We found out recently that an organization had switched to Zoom internally amongst about half their staff. Did they set up Zoom right? They did not. No, no password security, very little structural security inside the application itself. Nothing bad came of it, but it could have. And, those are the kind of things that, IT is there to protect. And essentially, we found out that this had happened. We kind of asked questions like, well, what was Zoom doing for you that the WebEx was not in this case? And we had a long conversation about that. And we're like, oh, okay. Well, let's make WebEx do those things. And they're like, wait, that's an option? Sure. I mean, we're happy to make changes if they fit the structural mission of the organization. And made a bunch of changes. And suddenly they realized, oh, if I talk to them, they fix things.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. If it turned out that Zoom was actually the better option, then hey, you could have done like a proper structured migration.
Well,
and things would have been so much easier for everyone.
in a lot of cases, those things like proper structured migration, people get the fear of the project manager in them, right? Like how many meetings is that going to be? And I have one project that's kind of on my docket right now where I know I have weekly meetings about it, but I'm not responsible for anything that's happening in this project. I'm not like the directly responsible individual, so it's just meetings I have to attend, and I hate those. And so I understand their fear of that kind of thing, but by the sif what we're doing as part of all of this is coming to them and saying, well, we see a bunch of Zoom use. Could we switch over and save a bunch of money because Zoom's cheaper than WebEx in this case? Well, yeah, totally. And then everybody comes away with, wow, and we saved $400 this year. And they start thinking about, well, maybe I'll get 4 of that in a bonus somewhere. And, that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, it's amazing what can come of talking to your IT department or talking to your colleagues.
Yeah.
So I don't know how many times where they, it's actually really common that like somebody from department Y will come to me and be like, hey, we need a solution to this problem. I've looked at these other ones here, and I'd be like, oh, department X is using this product already that will meet all those needs. We already have this, business level or enterprise level account. Consolidate tools, let them know. And not only that is you can, that gets departments talking to each other as well, because then they'll be sharing knowledge outside of that, which is another thing that I try to foster, in our organizations, is not just, not just, people coming to us for help, to IT for help, but for like there's our Jump Cloud uses so many different applications. There's no way that a small IT team is going to be familiar with the ins and outs of everything like there. But so I make it a point to also reach out to the people who've been using these applications for years and be like, hey, can you give me some insight? Like, how do you do this? Like, show them that like we also want to learn from them as well. And being like, hey, that feeling that they get, they're like, hey, I just helped IT, is that makes them feel really good.
Yeah, no, totally.
And people love that. And I along those lines, I make it known, like when I was regularly doing our onboarding, our other team member Noah, he handles all of our onboarding now. but when I was regularly doing our onboarding, I would tell them, my goal is so that Jump Cloud has the best IT department that you've ever worked with. What that means is that if you ever see us doing something or that's rubbing you the wrong way, or if you've worked with an IT department that you thought was phenomenal in another way, let us know. Like our success is going to be based off of how you feel we are doing.
Yes, absolutely.
And I tell them, I'll be completely transparent with you whenever possible. There's always going to be, when you hold the keys to the kingdom, you have access to a ton of information. Stuff gets shared with you. You can't always share all of it, but if you're transparent with the stuff you can share, they're more likely to believe you when you're like, hey, I can't really talk about that.
Exactly. Yep.
So be like, hey, and like as you mentioned before, be like, yes, and, or no, but, if there's not a reason, be honest with you. Be honest with them. I've told people, we're doing option A instead of option B because, it could be something as simple as more people in the organization are familiar with option A than option B. So it'd be more resource intensive, and there'd be too much of a drop in productivity to move over. But then again, if option B is head and shoulders better, then we'll say, hey, then we'll be transparent with management, being like, hey, there will be some growing pains into this, but we believe in the long run it's going to be worth it.
Yep.
And
yeah.
So just I found that it makes my job so much easier. And having the trust of my coworkers and my colleagues from all around. Like I've shown my finance team that I don't ask for frivolous things, that I do my homework before asking stuff. So I'm already like 2 or 3 steps ahead when I come and I ask them for something, because they'll be like, okay, if he's asking for it, then, we should at least, think about it.
Yeah. Well, and, we get into the point where not everybody thinks that IT is a people-focused job. A lot of people think that IT is a systems-focused job, and to some extent it is. But, there was one of those great, Twitter threads the other day that's basically explain your job, wrong answers only. And I would say that, my job is a human-computer interactions therapist. But, that's absolutely true. My job is a human-computer interactions therapist, because essentially, in a lot of cases, we're there to help manage people's relationship with their own technology. And while I don't have a couch that I travel with, I feel like I've definitely had those sessions in executive offices where essentially I'm acting as their therapist as they deal with their computer. But it's all about building the trust that goes with those systems, because, systems don't trust each other naturally, right? And that's true for a lot of IT systems. So if you've ever set up single sign-on, you know exactly how much work goes into trusting other systems, right? And building those relationships of trust. Those apply between your people and their computers and your people and their systems all day long. And so at the end of the day, what I really want folks to take away from all of this is that your job is as much human-computer interaction therapist as it is systems engineer. IT is a people job. IT is always a people job.
And I will say that's one of the big reasons why I chose IT instead of going into like CS, because I like, well, sales may not be for me. I do like interacting with people.
Yeah.
And, and then of course on the flip side, when my introvert starts peeking his head, I can go and I can bury my head in work if I need to. So I find it to be a beautiful balance between the two.
Yes.
And, along those lines, I had a conversation with my manager and my manager's manager about, like, there's when as organizations grow, they always are evaluating, like, where does this department fit in the grand scheme of things? And so, like, where does the IT department fit? So, like, right now we're under business support services. We used to be under operations engineering, which is where, like, DevOps and security teams live. And they were asking me, like, do you think you should go, like, back over to engineering? Should it be under, should stay under BSS, which is a subgroup of finance? And I'm like, well, the thing is, like, each of those are, like, facets of what IT does. I mean, like, really, there should be business operations. And that's, that to me, that's where I feel IT fits, because that covers, we're kind of facilities, kind of engineering, sales support. Well, not just sales, everybody's support.
Yeah.
We have our fingers in every single part of the business. So, in a way, it doesn't matter where you are, as long as you can do your job. And if you want to if you want to put it on paper, like where this department should live, it should be in a place that has exposure to everyone. And I'll say this, when we moved from operations engineering over to business support services, nothing changed, which is how it should be. Because, we already had these relationships with everybody else. We were already working cross departments. We already, we had the trust from higher up to be self-sufficient and autonomous. And so it didn't matter where we were on the org chart. We're still going to do our job to the best of our ability and help everybody that we could possibly help.
Yep.
And I think that, to me, that was a great sign that we were doing things correctly.
Absolutely.
And I don't think that would have been possible if, we didn't have that trust established, not only with our colleagues, but with the management teams.
Yeah. If you don't have the trust in your management team, that's, again, a lot like another IT department, not being trusted externally. You've got to really work hand in hand with all of these people. So, that's a really key part of a lot of these organizations, is having, a clear understanding of a collective mission and having buy-in from everybody involved.
Exactly. Couldn't have said it better myself. So, again, our guest has been Tom Bridge. Thank you very much. I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you.
Thanks so much, Ryan. I really appreciate it. And if folks want to read more about what I've written on IT stuff, I'm out at tombridge.com. Or please feel free to stop by the podcast at podcast.macadmins.org. And you can find us in any directory where your fine podcasts are found.
All right. Excellent. Thank you very much, Tom.
Thanks.
I knew that I was going to enjoy this, and it definitely happened.
Excellent. I'm so glad.
Thank you for tuning in to Where's the Any Key? If you like what you heard, please feel free to subscribe. Again, my name is Ryan Bacon. I lead IT at JumpCloud, where the team here is building a cloud-based directory platform that provides frictionless, secure access to virtually any IT resource from trusted devices anywhere. You can learn more and even set up a free account at jumpcloud.com.